Our guest today is someone who I've known for a very long time. We met in grade school and then we got to know each other very well in middle school when we started volunteering at the Kinnelon Public Library, the summer reading program. And if you told us then that we'd end up on a podcast together talking about nonprofit fundraising and philanthropy, I think that we both probably would have agreed that that would be right on brand because cutting out all those feet and hands and magnifying glasses for summer reading just lines up perfectly with where we both headed in life. So Sophia Tiajoloff has taken her career to the philanthropy side of the world, helping some of the most respected nonprofit organizations around. She recently left her role in New York City, and now she's headed off to Europe for a master's degree where she's going to look for new ideas and perspectives on the fundraising and social impact world. So, Sophia, welcome to So You Wanna.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you.
Welcome, Sophia.
Cute.
So, I'll start with give us an overview of your background professionally. What led to you getting the role at Fountain House initially?
Yeah. Obviously, in college, I went to Vassar College, liberal arts school, where it was an open curriculum. And so you got to study a wide variety of things from history, neuroscience, Russian studies, the psychology of film, and everything in between. And what I learned was that I was curious about the world and I loved learning. And originally thought I was going to be a neuroscience major, go into more of strict research. And then my path started shifting and changing once I started seeing all the policy impacts and also meeting people who were personally impacted by various different experiences. And especially on college campus, I would say I went to school from 2018 to, nope, I went to school
was going to say, it was a little earlier than that.
2014 to 2018. And that was also, if you remember, during the time, there was a lot of rise of mental health crises on college campuses. A lot of students were experiencing high rates of anxiety, depression. And so that definitely shaped, and I knew many people on campus that were struggling and shaped a lot of my worldview while I was studying psychology. Fast forward to my career, left college, and I was looking to make an impact. How to make an impact, what that looked like, I didn't really know. My senior year, I was part of a Special Olympics fundraising initiative, which actually opened the door for me to get my first job, which happens to be at Fountain House, which is a mental health organization that supports people living with serious mental illness. And they use the Clubhouse model, which uses community as a therapeutic intervention. And what started as kind of a pathway into impact, lo and behold, kind of changed my life. I thought I wanted to go into mental health solely, which I still am pursuing, and that's part of Ireland as well, where I'll be pursuing a master's degree in global mental health. But really during that time period, I walked into the door of a very unique nonprofit and a social issue area that touched not only on mental health, but there's intersections with poverty, with homelessness, with wealth inequality. And I walked into the development team, which I actually absolutely loved. And that was the business arm of a nonprofit that most people don't talk about. Often talk about social impact in terms of programs and the sustainability and long-term strategy of ensuring programs can continue and people can get access without barriers, often sometimes lives in different roles in the organization than I thought they did. So that's kind of a non-succinct way of how
So
I got here.
I have a lot of questions. Some things I know a little bit more about your background and Fountain
Mhm.
House and such. But before we even get there, I want to ask the question of your jump from your studies to your actual job.
Mhm.
How did you get the job at Fountain House? Because I remember you told me that you were working in development and like I always knew from our days at the library where it was like no task was too big or too small. Like we would just figure it out. I
Yeah.
always knew like you were a mover and a shaker, right? And like movers
Mhm.
and shakers can make it in any job. But I was
Yeah.
like, oh, development. That's not what I thought you were gonna do.
Yeah.
So like, how did you end up at Fountain House in that role?
Um, it's really interesting because so in school, I was actually really involved with the student athlete advisory committee. So I was um, outside of playing volleyball and studying, I was exploring a lot of community programs and finding ways for student athletes to connect to the Poughkeepsie community, whether that was through clinics or educational forums or different student body policies that people wanted to talk about on campus. And coming that transition, I actually started going in through a special events position. And that the Killen Public Library's experience of programming kind of suited really well to that. Um, because events were basically a funnel that enabled and brought new audiences to the organization. And I'm a chatter. I love talking to people. I love getting to know people. And they say that I walked through the doors and they were like, she just seems like a fit, like culturally. Um, but also, I just think events are really interesting because it's, especially for nonprofits, they're the first entry point many people have. And so it's the first taste of an organization's culture or um, what an experience day to day in a nonprofit is like through kind of a curated eye. And so I actually started there. And
Did you cold apply
I
for the
cold
job?
applied. Oh, yeah.
So
So,
see, there's faith in the world. Like you can
yeah.
cold apply and actually get a job.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting because I was on idealist.org looking through all the different job opportunities. I knew I wanted to do social impact
Is
work.
that like Indeed for nonprofits?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I did
Although
not know
I
that
actually think
existed.
Indeed just bought it, or they
Oh,
just
did they?
combined
I
today.
remember I was on
Yeah.
a nonprofit board, and Idealist is like the environment. I don't know if they got rid of this feature, but you can
Yeah.
like comment on the jobs. And
Mm.
it was at like the start of where listing salaries, like pay
Oh
transparency was
yeah.
a thing. I remember the nonprofit I was on the board of got eviscerated in the comments for not
Oh,
listing the salary, which wasn't quite yet a norm in New Jersey, but because we were so close to New
New
York
York.
City, it
Yeah.
like was the norm and people were
Mm.
crossing over the river and just got a visit. And it was just like, oh my God, Idealist is like lives up to its name. Like
Yeah.
this is where the idealists go to
Yeah.
find jobs.
And it's also that was something that was really, I think, interesting when looking at jobs right even on Idealist, because you're always going to find a mission statement there and you're always going to have kind of quick blurbs of like the culture of an org, um, which was kind of my default. Now with LinkedIn, when you look, it's much more kind of truncated. But
So something you said before kind of struck me in that it almost seems like an oxymoron that like nonprofits are still businesses at the end of the day. Like you still
mm,
need to like have the money to actually like provide services, programs, anything like that. Um, but like I said, it seems like an oxymoron because like you think of like a for-profit business as being like like generating like that's like the business. However, like
yeah,
nonprofits still need to like make money and
yeah.
like obviously then just like funnel it back into all the services whatever. But so my question is like when you like working for a nonprofit,
hmm
do you have to have like a certain sense of like business acumen? Are there other people in the organization that have to like, or is it all just people being like, I want to make the world better?
Yeah.
I don't want
I
Sophia to sell herself short here. Like the events team, and when she described the work she was doing, she had to be the jack of all trades because events in particular, like you were saying, it's the entry point and
Yeah, I
whatnot.
don't doubt it.
Like you're truly the marketing team, you're the donor relations team, you're the like human resources team where you have to like make sure that everybody on the team is like changing their schedule for this
yeah.
big event coming up. Like you're working with the finance, like you truly have to be the jack of all trades because it's the business.
Yeah. And I think also development as a whole, I think it's it's an interesting misconception. Because I think, yes, development is fundraising, and um, the development team is responsible for to ensure the resources um, are available for an organization to pursue the impact it wants to make on the world, right? And it requires a lot of long-term strategy. It requires a lot of community trust and building and a lot of kind of financial acumen. And um, the development work also, it's the skills even necessary. You are operational, then you're strategic in not only um, balancing short-term needs and long-term needs there, but you're also navigating ever-changing philanthropic environment or political environment. Most nonprofits have a development team, and they have an institutional arm, an individual arm, an operations arm. Through my experience, I've been able to touch upon um, all those arms, mostly living in individual and ops, though. And the development teams that are really successful kind of thread this really interesting balance between immediate impact and long-term sustainability. And I would say if you're on a development team, your job is kind of to work yourself out of a job, because if you can find a way for organizations to be sustainable long term, you're not going to need to be in the business of philanthropy. And when I first started at Fountain House, this is kind of public knowledge on the website too. But it was about a $6 million generating budget for fundraising. It grew to about a $21 million operation. And I remember when I first started, um, I was asking folks to support the organization, and most people would respond to me with the question like, "Why would I ever give a gift to mental health? And why is this important in society?" And I came out of college where I felt like my generation, the lingua franca or vernacular, I'll say, everyone talked about mental health, and it was just part of the generational understanding of society. Um, but that wasn't always the case. And by the time I just recently left the organization, but by the time I left, there's like this whole growing social consciousness around mental health. I think contributed by COVID, but in many ways, nonprofits are always, or I think, um, working to and building infrastructure to be ready to say yes when opportunity comes. And so much of development is matching the right opportunity, the right funder, the right marketing campaign, the right partner to sustain the organization's work. And when working with partners too, because nonprofits are in a larger ecosystem, even if you're working for, let's say, ending food poverty, you're also working with, I'm sure, homeless shelters, or you're working with maybe restaurants or corporate entities. And when different businesses or different sectors also are on a downfall, the development team, I think in particular, but programs as a whole, need to be really creative. So going back to your question of even, do people in the organization, does everyone need to have a financial understanding? I think everyone has to be aware.
Mhm.
Everybody is aware, because you have to, many ways to produce programs of excellence. Your margin for error is smaller, your need is greater, and every dollar you spend or every dollar you make, there's kind of weight to it. And I loved having that pressure.
It's almost like
But
creating shareholder value. I always like joke about that in my
mm,
extremely corporate job, like where,
yeah.
when I'm like goofing off with my coworkers, which I never do, but in theory, I'm always like,
Yeah.
wow, creating shareholder value, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
as like a joke. But like I feel like, again, it's like there's an analogous situation for nonprofits where, you're not creating shareholder value. However, like
Mm.
the analogous, the concept is like actually creating like a difference in the world. So like when it comes to like your donors and, your partners and everything, they want to see that difference. Like the programs have to like, accomplish what they set out for it to accomplish. Like the money has to be spent in ways that actually accomplishes what you guys set out to accomplish and this and that, you know.
And
So
you have a shareholder value. It's just like the public in
yeah.
many ways. Like you almost have more clients that you have to appease.
hmm
Because for ideally a lot of people,
the world.
the world, your program is so successful. Communities across the country need it to just like have a quality of life that's worthy of living. And if you're have a unique selling proposition, let's say at the beginning, and have a strong case for support, and then have now everyone also really wants research and numbers, and obviously when you're a smaller
Oh
nonprofit,
my
that's
God.
so much.
Paralysis by
Yeah,
analysis.
yeah,
It's like, please, nonprofits are obsessed with it at this point, and it's
yeah.
like, what are you doing with this data? Or like
Well,
donors, like what is this data gonna move you? Is it to make that
sometimes
giant
it
contribution?
does. I will say because okay, half of people usually give because they have a personal connection. And then there's people who do want to make a change, but they don't really know exactly what their mission is, but they still want their money to be meaningfully.
Oh, to be uber
Oh,
wealthy and
yeah.
have that
Well,
level
even
of discretion.
okay, so we were talking major gifts, but even I would say I'd argue for the $10 donor. Like there are people who I've spoken to on the phone and who they're like, I only have $500. And I want to give this $500 meaningfully to an organization. And that's somebody's, they're committing and choosing to give out of their own personal bank account to this. And that $500 might be the equivalent of 2 billion to somebody else. But um, sometimes when people are making those tough decisions and giving smaller amounts, sometimes they're the people who ask the most amount of questions because they really want the money to be going to something that's significant and meaningful. And um, I think assessing where your money goes is important. So
Do you find
yeah.
that like storytelling is a skill that you need for this kind of role? And the reason I ask that is because I think that like controlling a narrative is like a
Mm,
useful skill to have in like a lot of different industries. And like I was
mm,
just talking to somebody that I work with about like, like I recently got a promotion and she was like, "How did you do it?" And I'm like, I just kind of like told my boss all the things that I was doing, but like in a way that like I just like
Hold
very
on.
controlled. It's
you
it's
want-
We're
Frank's
not
accomplishments 2020 whatever.
there's
yeah.
So
literally a PowerPoint file that he
Um,
keeps on his computer.
yes, because it's storytelling, and this is like
yeah.
I
Storytelling
like
is an
actually feel
art.
like it's an
Yeah.
art and a skill,
I agree.
and I feel like in the nonprofit realm, which is why I'm bringing it up, it like could be extremely powerful to
That's called the
like
Yeah.
impact report in the nonprofit world.
yeah, but
I-
like the impact report, like also like like the vision that you see, like going forward, and like this and that. There's so many different parts of like kind of like creating the narrative for the
mm.
nonprofit, and so that's like kind of my question, like how much of your work is that narrative building, the storytelling.
And I think storytelling is a huge part of it. Um, and also, it's a very tricky line because
hmm
you're speaking to so many different audiences. You're walking into rooms with um, different belief systems. You're walking into rooms with different political slants. You're walking into rooms with different educational backgrounds, different class, geographic understandings of issues. Um, and so telling a story
hmm
or that can connect someone to the mission or the work that you're doing is the most important part and finding that common thread. And so oftentimes I say, um, the first meeting with a funder, I like to ask questions 85% of the time.
Mhm.
I want to know everything about them. I want to know what moves them. I want to know why they give, where their family lives, what school they went to why do they show up at an organization. Because if you're taking the time to visit a nonprofit, especially, you're already consciously thinking about contributing, whether that's your time, whether that's financial resources, or whether that's leveraging your network, or connecting to maybe your company's corporate social responsibility programs.
Was that a pointed remark?
Oh,
Because I work at a big
No,
corporation. No, I was
but
kidding.
Where you work to increase shareholder value? Well, you can
Yeah.
increase shareholder
a
value
few.
tenfold by contributing to a nonprofit.
This is true.
Uh-huh.
But storytelling is interesting because storytelling, and I think this also ties into a lot of marketing work, but how you tell the realities of an organization can obviously shape the way somebody sees an organization. And there's all these dances that I think development teams navigate, and people navigate because sometimes people who are a part of the organization, Fountain House is peer run. So we have members living with serious mental illness that work alongside me. They're my colleagues. They were my best friends. They're part of my community. And when speaking with funders, there might be information I have and stories I have, but I also have to be consciously aware of what I'm sharing.
Like knowing your audience.
Yeah, knowing
literally.
audience, and also to avoid exploitation or personal identification. Um, and also, I think there's been a narrative of people are often like social service recipients as opposed to contributors to social good, and people who volunteer at nonprofits, artists who create art thanks to art nonprofits, um, healthcare workers that work at nonprofits, like they're all contributing to society, and they're not like I always they're not recipients. They're active innovators. They're creators. They are sometimes like mathematical geniuses. They're maybe the next, Steve Jobs. And the whole point is to remove barriers so people can actively participate. It's just sometimes, depending on the work, there's different stigmas or barriers to participating in greater society that need to be removed in order to open those opportunities to others. Um, and so, but all to say with storytelling, the amount of time I have spent thinking about how am I going to paint this picture to someone who has no understanding or no lived experience. There's a lot of people who come and funders who give because they have a personal connection. They've dealt with anxiety or depression themselves. They're a CEO that lives with schizophrenia that is not willing to disclose that in their business. They have a background XYZ. Their family members navigated something, and they want to give to support. And then there's people who come who may not have that same entry point of knowledge or lived experience. And then it's a matter of how do you paint this picture to make them feel that experience. So some things I remember I used to say for specifically like mental health is like, have you ever been to a psych ward? Have you ever been to a room painted entirely white with no art on the wall and doctors like staring at you to look at your behavioral movements? Like, how would you feel? And then I would bring them to a program, which maybe it was like a farm that was operated in actually Montague, New Jersey, and it's green, and there's people contributing, and volunteers are coming every single day, and there's people talking to each other, and I'm like, these are two different ways to look at behavioral health. Which one do you want to see in the future? And you could frame it that way, and that is kind of a storytelling, or sometimes it's a personal narrative of like, I experienced X, this is why Y, Z are necessary.
I think it's
Yeah.
something that we attend a lot of nonprofit events.
Mm.
We work with nonprofits on storytelling, and something that we've struggled with a little bit is that the ever changing donor class
Mm.
and what that actually means. Because as you said, the donor class is not just those who are giving hundreds of thousands or millions
Yeah.
to sponsor new wings or new buildings.
Yeah.
It's also people who are giving $10 monthly, who are giving $500 a year.
Yeah.
It's a different donor class. And I have found that even the generational differences, that the
Mm.
younger donor class is much more in the latter category there, where they're
Mm.
willing to give $10 a month or $500 a
Yeah.
year to multiple nonprofits.
Yeah.
That maybe it does add up to this much larger contribution, but it's a very different style of giving.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of different. We can go into grants, annual funds, style like direct response, digital marketing world, major gifts, individuals. And to your point, the narrative has to change for each of those audiences. Um, what inspires? There's a really interesting research that breaks this out into even you're talking about generational differences, but even the tools in which people are willing to donate. If you're under the age of, I don't know, 30 or, I'll just say that, you're probably more likely to give online through Instagram,
Apple
through
Pay,
Apple
it
Pay,
better.
automatic. Yeah, do the one-time donation. You might more willing to give through Instagram when a friend links and asks through that donation. Pay
I'll even
cool.
say I've noticed major cultural differences too, as far as
Mm.
what the types of campaigns
Mm.
that nonprofit campaigns that people of different backgrounds are willing to contribute towards.
Yeah.
And especially in the social services realm, a lot of it has to do with how different cultures, different countries that people have immigrated from or first, second generation, how they receive social services and their
Yeah.
understanding of it as a whole. It really drives those differences in how they give and how they engage.
Oh yeah, and so there was this interesting research study that looked at different messaging tools and how um, different cultural like ethnicities actually gave differently to causes based off of messaging. And I can't remember the exact details, but I knew Americans were more receptive to messaging that gave a sense of, oh, this person accomplished, overcame something. They are now great. Please donate. While I think the study was in Spain, but I have to fact check that. Where giving was actually more people donated when the message actually had an image with like dramatic black and white, like a child struggling.
The ad
And
with the dogs on and the
yes,
kids, like, yeah, with the
yeah,
somber, oh my God, what's that?
uh,
The artist.
Sarah McLachlan in the arms of
yes,
an angel.
Yeah, that
In
one.
the arms.
and it changes, and so it's dependent on your cause, how you want your brand, and also most nonprofits, I'll just say, don't have extensive marketing or budgets. And I mean, some do when they grow to a certain scale and are able to make that operational investment, and that's often the hardest part to donate to because um, people love knowing, 80 to 90% cents on the dollar are going to um, make somebody's life amazing. How do you explain to them that paying for that HR salary so each of those workers can get paid on time? So when that call comes in, we have somebody responding on a 988 hotline or an emergency response is equally as valuable. And so a lot of nonprofits often don't have those massive marketing opportunities unless there's somebody on the board or other relationship connections that can maybe create a pro bono opportunity. And there's some really successful. I don't want to make a blanket statement about nonprofits because there's also some incredibly successful um, organizations and that can just like spit marketing on a dime. They have amazing teams, and that's really helpful, for fundraising. Um, and also, then there's these really interesting companies, like for-profit companies, that actually gear their entire work is reduce rates to support nonprofit marketing. Um, and so there's a lot there, but messaging has a direct relationship to development and fundraising, I would say, and your audience, like who engages.
Mhm. So I have a bit of a hot take
Okay, go for it.
about nonprofits.
Yeah,
I think there's way too many.
this is interesting.
And I think
Mm,
that in New Jersey, for example, there was a
mm,
big reckoning this
yeah,
past budget cycle because I don't think that the general public realizes how much state government actually gives nonprofits as grants.
yeah.
And in New Jersey, there was a lack of money, as there always is in the
Mm-hmm.
budget cycle. And a lot of smaller nonprofits had their prior grants cut.
Mm,
And I would make the argument that all of these micro nonprofits that existed for like sole purposes, programs that they were running, were really just inefficient, like power grabs of, a
mm,
couple people in communities that instead these services should have been consolidated efficiently,
mm,
which now hopefully it'll happen
yeah,
to more established nonprofits like Fountain House that have
yeah.
much larger budgets, have a proven model versus, Joe and Jane Schmo that just want to start a foundation with their name on it so
Mm-hmm.
that they get the credit. And meanwhile, they're not actually delivering any real communal benefit, but they have the
Yeah.
political ties because they're wealthy to get a budget allocation.
There's a lot of conversation around also because of the amount of 501c3s, whether or not all 501(c)(3)s should. And for those of you who don't know what a 501c3 is, that is basically the um, it's like
It's
a
the
statement of
501's the
determination.
subchapter of
Okay.
the tax code and it's like the
It
subsection.
establishes you as a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And the um, number of 501c3s that are growing, and there was discourse taking place on whether or not taxes should actually look different based off of the missions of certain 501c3, because a lot of people were establishing their own, and maybe it was a well-meaning celebrity that created this, but it's really functioning more as a foundation and should have a different space. Or sometimes it's a matter, I think it's like the National Golf Association is technically a
I was going to say the
501c3
NFL is as
and
well.
NFL. And there's a conversation where if should you be getting the same tax breaks as a food or a shelter?
Which it
Um,
matters for two reasons, right? I'll get into a little of the nitty
yeah,
gritty what I've learned.
yeah,
The C3 is important because it's the tax exempt status for the organization. So the
yeah.
buildings, the land,
Mm,
it also implicates their payroll taxes if they have to pay like unemployment insurance in advance or after the
yeah,
fact. It implicates a lot on the organization side, but then it's also on the donor side, which with the Trump tax chaos doesn't really matter for most donors anymore
yeah,
who are not, because most people are not itemizing, but
yeah.
those who are 501c3, you can deduct up to 50% of your income. I think it's of your income for if you give in terms of charitable contributions to a
Mm-hmm.
501c3 org. If it's to a foundation, which is a
Yeah,
different C something or E or
yeah,
whatever, that's only 25%. So that's where the big difference is, that then when you have people who suddenly have a giant capital gain that they want to offset, they turn around
mm,
and they look for 501c3s to give to so that they can deduct up to 50% of that capital gain.
yeah. And I do think that's why it's really important to do research when you're contributing to nonprofits. Um, every nonprofit, first of all, if you're on a website and it doesn't even say it's a 501c3, that's probably not to donate. There are scams that actually mimic other nonprofits that are established just to get money for those pieces. Um,
It's always nonprofits, it's always interesting to me because I see, and I think we were talking about
Yeah.
idealists before, and the whole
Yeah.
salary transparency aspect, I think has
Mm.
helped things a little bit because I used to see it more commonly where nonprofits would exploit labor.
Yeah.
And I would find it ironic that it was this like social service nonprofit or this whatever type of nonprofit that wanted to do good for people,
Yeah.
but meanwhile was exploiting their own workforce.
Wringing them
Well,
dry. It's just
also,
like
like,
everything they could get out
but
of them.
think about it. If you're a lot of foundations or funding vehicles want 90% to go to programs, right? Um, there's also, I think, a performance or like a staff incentive. When you're a well-paying nonprofit, obviously you want to keep great talent and you want to ensure that great talent can grow um, in those organizations. And if people are not comfortable donating to general operating funds, general operating usually covers staff or
Yeah.
is a large part of
I
it.
hate those
And
pie
that's not,
charts because when we talk about like that 90% or 85%, that works for the American Red Cross that has,
mm,
I don't know, 100 million or more dollar budget where
yeah.
like that is possible. There's an economy of scale there.
Mm,
But when you're talking about these very small nonprofits, it's just not realistic that they're going to be able to put, I think the American Cancer
yeah.
Society was like up to 97% going towards, but when you like dig in a little more, like, yeah, they can put 97% because most of their staff are scientists
Yeah.
doing research.
Yeah.
So like that's 97% of their money is actually in program services. Yes.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, like this small social service nonprofit is just not going to be able to do it.
And it also prohibits and people from growing and staying. I think there's a lot of oftentimes they talk about high turnover rates or burnout associated with nonprofit, and balancing all of that is very real. Development is considered one of the highest stress
I would
job
never want to work in
spaces,
development. Like
and
even on political campaigns, I'm like, until candidates, fundraising, don't do it. Like just the one thing I don't touch.
a lot of people say that, and I can understand. And I often say that I think I was so um, successful at Founders because I loved the community and I had space to be creative and grow. And there was an incredible team. Um, and those things, and they had, like, I think I had 20 or 30 days off a year. And that, especially in, I don't know if this is similar in your role, but oftentimes in the healthcare nonprofit world, we talk about moral fatigue, where you just see the impact of systems impacting people negatively, like not being able to afford X medication, then leading to Y, or the fatigue of fighting certain policies that just don't make sense and having to work around it, and then seeing people struggling as a result, but not being able to be the person that can find the solution, and that fatigue and that drain that comes with that. And um
Yeah, there's definitely some cognitive dissonance because I
yeah.
work in pharma and it's a lot of people have a lot of opinions about the pharma industry.
I have
But
a few.
yeah, and like it's warranted, don't get me wrong, but like yeah, like I also, kind of get
Yeah.
like the internal messaging about like, here's what all of our work is doing for people, for the patients whose like lives we're saving and stuff like
Yeah.
that, which, you know, like I said,
Is true,
cognitive
and there's
dissonance,
a whole
yeah.
system that is profiting when sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I was gonna say, I do want to talk about like Fountain House has such a unique
Mm,
aspect to it.
yeah.
The mix. I think the one thing I'll add is that like obviously operating in New York City where costs are just crazy to literally house people, provide social service, like development and funding that operation is just like on a totally different level than anywhere else. It's just crazy expensive, right?
Yeah.
And like the machine that has to be run there. But I think that the recent political landscape and shifting,
Mm,
I think, you talked about how you noticed a bit of a shift in people the consciousness of mental health and mental
Yeah.
social services. And I think there's almost becoming more of a demand for not government to support, but there's just a social shift, definitely in New York City. We also saw it in New Jersey with some of our electoral outcomes in the
Yeah.
primary. I think there's this shift, and we're seeing it nationwide, where people are saying that like life shouldn't have to be shitty for people.
Yeah.
And we should be able to
Mm.
find ways in the most advanced nation in the world to not have this,
Yeah.
not have these problems, and actually have solutions.
I have found a lot more commonality with people than I expected. And I've found a lot more people in the world who um, are actually philanthropic and incredibly generous, and kind of built this belief in generosity for me that I'm like, everyone is actually generous. You just have to unlock it. Um, which, people disagree, but when you're surrounded by hundreds of people that will show up in a crisis, I think we see emergencies happening every single day. And after a crisis, that is usually when you see donations skyrocket. And rapid response fundraising is a huge tool in nonprofits' tool belts. Even in development, you're always weighing like short-term immediate needs. Like, can we get money to fund this wall that needs to be fixed? Or can I play out this game a year and a half, because I think this could be a $5 million transformational gift that can support operating programs and a new initiative in the infrastructure there. And so you're always like fighting between these two immediate responses and long-term thinking. And I think successful development teams can like move through that. Um, but there's also a cultural change, I think, that's required, where we live in a very consumer culture, and most people don't think about nonprofits until they need one, and until your family member is the one looking for services, or you are navigating the streets because of an unfortunate eviction, or you're the one that desperately needs access to a doctor but cannot find one. And then your internet is out, and then you go to a library, and that's the only free public internet service you have. It's the only time you start thinking about it, because you're in these spaces. So until there's a cultural, I think, shift where people um, think a little bit more about what, and I'm not like a financial advisor, but when you think about what what $10 can do, $10 can do a lot if put in the right hands. $1 million can do a lot if leveraged the right way. $10 million could run a successful program for multiple years, and so I think demanding that type of transparency, and really being critical of how we as a society use money and where it goes is actually like a very fruitful conversation, because it parcels through and enables us to invest our money in things that have the greatest impact for ourselves and society. Um,
Kind of going
yeah.
off that,
Yeah.
Sophia, I think this needs to be our last question. But so let's say listening to this podcast, there are two people. Because you know what? We just started this podcast. Maybe there are only two people listening
Yeah,
to
that's
this.
true.
And one of them
Yeah.
is somebody who wants to get involved in working for nonprofits, similar to everything you just described. And the other person has money that they want to give because, they just got their MBA. They are making a lot of
Mm.
money. Preview, next episode. So somebody who wants to get involved in nonprofits, somebody who has money and wants to contribute to nonprofits. What advice would you give to those two people?
Go to the nonprofit. Call the development team. They should be able to answer the questions you have. Meet somebody in person. It can be a transformational experience.
I
And
want to, we
yeah.
passed over it, but when you talked about the endorphins associated with
Oh
giving,
yeah.
I wanted to say that all those finance bros
Mm-hmm.
who are getting their endorphin rush
Yeah.
from sports betting,
Yeah.
kicking away $5, $10 every single day,
Yeah.
they could get that same rush from giving to a worthwhile cause.
They can. And there are some that do, and you can meet more of them too. So there it actually feels like a high when you donate.
It's better than gambling.
It's better than gambling. And
Because either way, you're losing money.
Yeah,
true.
And with all those small nonprofits,
Yeah.
could be a
Yeah.
winner, could be a loser.
Your money might as well go to making somebody's life better.
yeah. I also might go to I'm like, people want to make everyone's life better, but sometimes it's actually you're enabling the machine to continue working. And I
Yep.
feel like that's
Mhm.
a huge
You're paying it forward
yeah,
that way.
you're paying it forward. And sometimes it's like the old machines that work really well, you keep using the program until that really great one comes, and then you're like, okay, now we really need this. But there are certain like tricks of the trade that have been around, and some nonprofits that have been around for years because they're doing things that are actually incredible.
Yeah. I mean,
And-
the American Red Cross, it goes back to World War I.
Yeah.
So
And paying it forward is the
Well,
best thing you can do.
on that note, thank you so much for joining us today, Sophia.
Thanks, Sophia. This was really fun, really informative.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on the show.